Well, good morning, everybody. This is Linda Jackson from Food Focus, and welcome to Webinar Wednesday. Thank you so much for joining us. It's so great to have all of you. Some very interesting names joining us today. Got a full house. Over 100 people have registered for this webinar. In fact, the DSA webinar series has just been a crazy success. Well done, Jacqueline. I know Jacqueline's in the background. So well done, Jackie. This has been an excellent project and has been such a lot of fun. While you're getting yourself settled and moving from one Zoom session to the next, I just want to take you through a couple of housekeeping issues with regards to GoToWebinar software. So let's have a look at a short presentation before we get into the main deal for today. So we've hopefully by now you've figured out how the software works. And so from that point, it is so great to be able to thank the Dairy Standard Agency once again for being such a generous sponsor, not only of today's Webinar Wednesday, but in fact of a series of webinars. We've been doing these now for a few months and it's been excellent to see the response. That tells me there's a real need out in the market for great technical and credible information about how to manage your dairy processes right all the way back to the farm. We went onto the farm, we chatted about farm issues, and today we can actually be looking again through the whole cold chain and the importance of it and what it actually means from farm all the way to that bottle and finally to the retail outlet. So Jacqueline, thank you so much for partnering with us. Thank you to the Dairy Standard Agency for investing in Food Focus to be able to assist with this series of presentations. Today we're talking about the chain we should not break, the unbreakable cold chain, and the importance of the dairy cold chain, the importance of not breaking this chain, and the keeping milk and other dairy products cold at all times. We just simply cannot overemphasize it. It's just such an important principle of every aspect of the systems that we put in place. And today we're going to be chatting about why certain parts are so important, as well as the basic principles of efficient milk cooling, milk hygiene and quality, what cooling technologies are available to us, and the very important requirements around the calibration and verification of your temperature monitoring equipment, including thermometers. So I'm definitely not going to be telling you all this stuff. I'm going to be listening and making notes because I'm sure I'm going to learn a whole lot of information today. And so I have the great pleasure of handing the presentation over today to Rykie Visser from AgriNet. So Rykie, thank you so much for being with us today. It's so great that you're prepared to give up some of your time to be able to work with us on this very, very important subject of the cold chain. So Rykie, while I'm introducing you, won't you switch your camera on so everyone can see you, that you're joining us today. It will be great for them to see who our presenter is on the screen. So why don't you pop your camera on for us and unmute yourself? That would be great. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Rykie, why he gets himself settled. He was born in Zimbabwe. He studied at the University of Pretoria. He has an engineering degree, and then he did a food processing engineering, a further food processing engineering degree, which is great. He worked as a research engineer at the ARC for 12 years. He then moved to De Laval, and he was in charge of the Sub-Saharan distribution network, and even stayed in Kenya. So you've been around the continent. He's worked directly with the dairy farming community from the ground level all the way to the top level. I love this part. Training program for the Sub-Saharan region, as well as coordination from farm level for dairy farmers, a training program specifically around that. I'm passionate about training, so I really love that part about your career, because I know you're going to train us today and give us really good advice. And as a result of this, he's been in and out of lots of African countries. His yellow fever card is definitely well used. He's been a regular guest speaker at many official agricultural occasions. He's presented numerous papers at international conferences all over the world, and he's written a host of articles in agricultural magazines. Not only has he written for magazines, but he's in fact written and compiled training manuals. He's a founder member of the Institute of Dairy Technology, and he's presented various technical and practical, love that, practical papers. Currently, he's the Africa Development Manager for Agrinet, and they are the biggest wholesale distributor for co-ops and hardware outlets in Southern Africa. And his main target is to go back into sub-Saharan Africa and to develop the market segment for Agrinet. So what a glowing CV. Rykie, I can't wait to hear more from you. So I'm going to hand over the screen to you so that you can take us away with your presentation. Thank you so much for being with us today. We can't wait to hear what you have to say. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity. I really love to be involved in the dairy industry. It has been a passion of my life, and thank you very much for this great opportunity. Yes, we're going to talk today about efficient cooling and the effect on milk quality. Now, there are really it is important to tell you all up front that this is not a high technical skilled presentation. It's down to ground level, so we know where the problem starts, because that is, I feel, where we have to go down and ensure that we have quality milk to be able to cook properly. So the agenda, in short, we will go back a bit to the basics and let us all just see what is milk and what is the composition of milk. Then we will touch on the basics of cooling, milk hygiene, residues, the cleaning of the system, somatic cell counts and bacteria, and I believe that has a big influence on the milk quality and the cooling. Then we will touch on cooling technology, and then a short presentation on calibration, a basic calibration of thermometers, and after that there will be a question and answer session. So first of all, let us look at the composition of raw milk. We all know that milk consists out of about 80%, 87% of water, and the balance is consists of about 13% dry substances, which is either suspended or dissolved in the water. And depending on a lot of factors, the fat percentage can vary from 2.5 to 4.4%, and the solid non-fats will contribute for the rest of the percentage. If you look in the bar graph or a pie graph, this will look like, as you can see on the screen, again, the fat around about 4.5%, lactose 4.6%, casein 2.7%, which is important for cheese production, whey protein 0.6%, and all your minerals and salts and vitamins, the rest of the balance. Now, what are the basics of efficient cooling? We all know that milk is one of the most important animal products for human consumption. And to maintain the quality is very, very important. And it starts at the farm level. And that's why I think it's important that we look at the details on farm level and take it through where the milk process is collecting the milk. So cooling is one of the most efficient and effective way to maintain the milk's freshness. So why do we want to cool milk? First of all, to inhibit the bacterial spoilage, and we will go into more detail there, to extend the storage on the farm, and that will lead to the decrease of milk transport cost. Now, apart from your feed cost, which is about 75% of production cost, transport of milk also adds a huge chunk to the bottom line. So that's why we intend to lengthen the time between the collections to make it more profitable, but that also has got a financial implication. And then, of course, we want to improve the raw milk quality delivered to the milk processor, and to increase the profit, of course, for the farmer and the dairy industry. And of course, increase the milk quantity per farm, and also improve the ergonomics. Now, where does it start all? And I have to take you back to the basics, because that's the most important place to start. It all starts at the milking process. In other words, the milking parlors, and there are many different types of milking parlors, and it's not part of this the scope of this presentation, but be aware that that is actually where farmers spend a lot of money to harvest the milk and to ensure that, but that is where the quality of the milk can really get bad. It also starts with how the cows are housed, where they live, and also, of course, what feed they have, because that also have got an influence on the milk quality, and at the end of the day, the coolability of the milk. And also calf care. Why calf care? Because those are your replacement cows for the future. Many farmers, or some farmers, neglect their calf care, and once those calves are coming into production, they already have a lot of problems, health problems, and that can also contribute to bad health and bad quality of milk. So it's a total holistic approach that we need to follow. The design of facilities are also one of the biggest advantage, or can be one of the biggest disadvantages if it's not done properly. And I'm referring to stress levels of cows. Cows are not meant to stand so close to each other in a holding yard. They get very hot, so heat stress plays a big role in somatic cell counts, especially in South Africa from November until March every year. And there's a lot of problems that one can resolve if the planning is done properly, and also to minimize the stress levels on the cows. If we look at milk hygiene and quality, now the influences on the quality of milk consists out of physical hygiene, chemical hygiene, and microbiological hygiene. Physical hygiene means when looking at a surface, the surface seems to be free from impurities. That's normally after a pre-rinse through your system. A chemically clean system contains so little foreign matter, biofilms, detergent, etc., that no negative influence on milk quality can be detected. So that's also normal after rinse. Microbiological clean refers to a surface that harbors so few microorganisms that the quantity and quality of the possible contamination of milk are of no practical importance to the quality of milk in relation to the health or product quality. So in practice, we say that this surface is disinfected. So very important that milk cooling prevents the increase of the number of microorganisms. Just want to reiterate, it prevents the increase of the microorganisms. There are a few places in any milk plant or wherever milk is being transported in where one can do visible detection to see if there's some problems. And this will ensure that you can assist the farmer or a processing plant or whatever the case might be to see where the problems are and how one can address that. Just a few pictures to illustrate this. If there is a calcium problem, one will normally see these white deposits on the stainless steel surfaces. And of course, an acid detergent is the most effective way to get rid of any mineral deposit. Barium, which is also sometimes a problem, and that can also easily build up very quickly. And of course, the right cleaning routine and dosage is very important to maintain to ensure that you don't have mineral buildups. Iron, very important in areas where the water contains a high level of iron, and that can cause some bacterial problems, especially when it's left untreated, and can also contribute to higher bacterial levels. Protein, very common. If there's a protein problem, one can see this rainbow-like color on the stainless steel surface, and that will indicate that you've got a protein problem, and that can be rectified very easily with the right dosage of detergent, which we will address a bit later. Milkstone. Now, minerals, fat, and protein can form a layer called milkstone. It is very hard to remove, and sometimes if you try to remove it, it may also lead to surface damage, and that, of course, is not food hygiene quality surfaces anymore, and we can expect some bacteria problems in a plant. So the hygiene and the cleaning program is very important to follow. If there is a fat problem, fat deposit problem, it's very easy to determine. It's easy where you see the water beading on the surfaces, and also very easy to resolve by means of the right detergents and program. So let's look at cleaning, because that's where it starts with the quality of milk, and to ensure that you can cool the milk down to take care of the quality. So what determines the efficient cleaning? First of all, there are 4 factors that determine efficient cleaning: temperature, detergent, time, and wash action. You need all 4 of those components to ensure that the surfaces that are in contact with milk are cleaned properly. And I will not go into specific programs in detail. I know dairy processors have got very high-end type of wash programs. On the farm, it's more simple, and I will just deal with the more simple way of cleaning. Normally, after milking, we start with a pre-rinse, and it's not with cold water, because the milk is around about 35, 37 degrees when it leaves the cow's udder. So if you use cold water to rinse the plant, it actually helps all the fat to deposit onto the stainless steel lines. So the pre-rinse must be done with the lukewarm water around about 35 to 40 degrees Celsius to ensure that you remove most of the milk deposits in the milk lines. Then of course you do a circulate solution with the initial temperature of around about 80 to 85 degrees Celsius. And that solution is discharged at a minimum of 40 degrees Celsius. If it goes lower, the chances are very good that you will have more deposits again at the end of the wash inside the line. So there's no use actually to wash the line if you not get rid of the water during the washing cycle. So again, that's why it's important to determine the right amount of hot water available at the set temperature of around about 80 to 85 degrees Celsius. Then of course you rinse with clean, cool water, not cold water again, of around about 35 degrees Celsius to make sure that all the deposits are removed from the system. What is important is that we use basically 2 types of detergents in a wash cycle. We use acids and an alkaline detergent. And the main difference is basically just between their pH values. The pH value indicates the concentration of hydrogen ions in a solution. So that's why we know a strong alkaline solution will have a very high pH value, and vice versa for your strong acid solution. So what is the good fundamentals for detergents? First, it needs to have a wetting agent. It must also dissolve and have a chemical reactivity. There must also be the composition must be so that it must also provide emulsification and dispersion, and also water softening is important. And of course, the rinsability and disinfecting properties are part of a good fundamental chemical. Most important is that detergents are there to kill bacteria as well. And that's where the quality of milk starts to get bad if you don't look after that. So alkaline detergents provide chemical energy to dissolve the organics, all the fats and proteins, base deposits, and acid detergents will provide chemical energy to dissolve all the minerals, your calciums and magnesiums. So alkaline, fats and protein, and acids, all the minerals. Then you've got you should have a good clean machine if you comply to all the different temperatures. So what are the functions of detergent ingredients? First of all, the alkaline detergent. That transforms fat into soap, or so-called saponification. It also solubilizes proteins with the help of the chlorine in the detergent. So in that way, one can get rid of your fat and protein. It also consists out of sequestrians. That complexes the calcium and magnesium. So if there's water hardness, This is the way that the detergents can assist to get rid of those deposits. And it will also keep the hardness in suspension until it has been rinsed away. It also consists out of surfactants. That lowers the surface tension and detach the fat from the surfaces, and also have a defoaming property. In this way, all the impurities are actually lifted, and it is possible to rinse it away. And again, if the temperature is not high enough, then you will get all these deposits again on the stainless steel surfaces. Acids, as I mentioned, that's to remove all your minerals. So descale and remove the minerals, and it also prevents the bacteria growth in a low pH environment. And that's why we leave the system after it had been rinsed with the acid detergent as it is. So that will inhibit any growth of bacteria. So the parameters of cleaning. First of all, the water must be in contact with all the surfaces where milk has been flown through. There must be also water speed and turbulence to ensure you've got the action inside. You can compare it with a washing machine. So you need the action to clean inside the lines especially. There are different CIP or clean in place programs available. Basically, most of the systems make use of alternate cleaning, which means you have a alkali detergent wash in the morning and then an acid wash in the evening, according to the specifications of the supplier of the detergent. There are also alkali dominant cleaning, where alkali cleaning is done 11 to 14 times a week, and then acid 3 times a week to 1 per month. It depends on the water quality and the problems that one has on the farm regarding the cleaning of the system. Water quality and hardness, as I've said, it depends on we want to remove the minerals, and if the water is more hard, you will have more dosages of acid washes. What is very important, and that's not only on the milking machine or the cooling tank, but any place where you are working with milk and there are transport lines in place, is that first of all, the designs are very important for the slopes, which should be a given, and you must have automatic drain valves. So after every wash, all the water must be drained from the system. If not, it really creates an area for bacteria to grow. So important to note that all the water are drained after the wash cycle. Especially at the cooling tanks, it's very easy to go to the milk cooling tank outlet and inspect there if there's any water left there, and one can see also if the rubber seals are cracked or not. One thing that we have to touch on basically are somatic cell counts and bacteria counts, because that influence the quality of milk. And I will say it again at the end, you cannot cool quality into milk. If there are a certain level of bacteria in milk, this is the best it will stay. You will not pasteurize quality into milk or cool quality into milk. So let us look at mastitis quickly. Now, dairy farmers sell basically one product, and that's milk. We all know that. So therefore, we have to take all factors in account to ensure the higher profit margins and also to minimize the cost. That is the basic of dairy farming. Somatic cell counts. So at the infection site, that's inside the cow's udder, the somatic cells look for bacteria coated with antibodies. Then it uses enzymes and other tools to destroy the bacteria, and also releases milk bacteria into the milk. So that creates the milk quality problem. And that's why I say it all starts with your calves and the cows to ensure that they don't have mastitis, or as little as possible. There's also a huge impact of somatic cell counts on the impact on the butter fat content, because the enzymes in the milk may damage the butter fat and releases fatty acids into the milk and these produce off flavors. And the milk processors will surely tell you that bad quality of milk will also have less kilograms of cheese or proper milk that they can put on the table. So important that we have to look at the somatic cells to ensure that it's less as possible. As I mentioned, it will also influence your casein, which is important for cheese making. So where do we measure the somatic cell counts? And that's very practical to do. First of all, the bulk tank. It's also been done on individual cows, or these days the electronics have been evolved so much that it's been done quarterly with every milking. These days I can also measure the blood content in milk, even the somatic cell counts, the milk temperature, and also look at some enzymes in the milk, and even if the cows are on heat. So there's a lot of factors that can be measured individually with every milking these days. And if the cow has got mastitic milk, it should be diverted and not end into the milk cooling tank, because that it can contaminate the rest of the healthy milk as well. So the bulk tank, and that's where many of you know on the farm level where one can test for the quality. This is typically done either by the milk processor, and it's a representative sample of all the cow's milk. And cows with serious mastitis, as I said, the serious mastitis milk must be diverted from the milk cooling tank and should not be fed to calves anyway. It should be fed either to pigs or just discarded, because it is not healthy milk at all. So the rule of thumb is to agitate the tank for 5 minutes. Then a sample should be taken from the top, and also make sure that all the items or equipment used is sterilized properly. It should also be done 2 hours after milking is completed. And that is to ensure that the temperature goes down to 4 degrees Celsius, which is the optimum temperature for cooling of milk. Any cows that do have mastitis above a certain level will definitely influence the total bacteria count and the mastitis level in the cooling tank. And we know farmers are paid according to quality of milk. So if the total bacteria count is high and the somatic cell count is high, you will definitely end up in less money in the pocket. Just an indication how big the influence of somatic cell counts is. A normal total bacteria count or somatic cell counts of 500,000 per milliliter will represent about a 6% loss in milk production. Now that is huge, and 500,000, I wouldn't say that's the norm. Of course, one will always try to drive it down to about 200, 250,000 somatic cells for the total herd in milk. But it goes easily up to 500,000 in muddy conditions, or if there is heat stress conditions or any other stress condition on the cows. And that can also be human inflicted when people don't treat the animals properly, or the structures might be of such a nature where cows are slipping, etc., etc. So that causes the cows to release a lot of somatic cells, and that causes the milk quality to go down. So we have to take all the factors into account. Not to say after this presentation that you will be able to know all these factors, but at least you can be part of the solution of a committee or some kind of a meeting that you have with your farmers to try and address these problems. So let us look at total bacteria count. Where does it start? It starts at the teat end and the exterior surface of the teat. That's the only way where the total bacteria count can come from. That's why it's important that you have the right procedures when preparing the cows to be milked. It seems like a silly point to talk about this, but this is really one of the biggest problems where farmers, where they suffer from total bacteria count. You have to start at the basics, and that's at the cow's teats. That's the only part of the cow that's in contact with the milking machine or the teat liner, and that's where many of the problems can start. Here's some samples of some problems that you experience typically in the milking parlor. It doesn't look very healthy, and there's a lot of E. coli that can enter either through your cluster or even through your liners on the outside, that it goes into your air lines or your vacuum lines, and after milking, when it gets warm or hot, it can heat up, and all of that gases go through to your milk line as well. There's just a receiver and a vacuum control valve. So important to have the basic hygiene control on the farm. Just under a microscope to show you what formic acid does to rubber, and that's just normal acid washing. If you don't drain all the after rinse from the lines, it can create a lot of problems, and that it creates a lot of places or cracks where bacteria can get hold of, and very, very hard to remove. So important to look at all these different aspects. On the liner, the inside of the liner, as I say, this is the only part in contact with the cow's teats. There's just a cutaway of a liner. You can see all the small cracks and the growth of bacteria and impurities here, and of course that cannot be removed easily. Outside on the farm, and that's why I say it's important that you not look only at the cooling tank. You have to look at the whole area where the cows are housed. What is happening outside? Are the cows walking in muddy conditions? This was taken in the Western Cape during a very wet spell of time. And definitely, if a cow enters a parlor like this with mud on the cow's teats and the whole udder, it's very, very difficult to clean it properly before touching the cluster and milk the cow. And you will end up with E. coli in the milk, and at the end of the day, it will influence the cooling ability of the milk and the quality. So what are the growth conditions for bacteria? That the most common, of course, temperature, light, some acidity, the presence or the absence of oxygen, water, growth inhibiting agents, and nutrients. So we have to ensure that the washing cycle or the hygiene cycle is done properly and according to specification. If we look at temperature and the growth of bacteria, and that's why we say that 4 degrees is the most efficient temperature to cool milk and to keep it at 4 degrees Celsius to maintain the cooling chain. And I'm not talking about a long life or so-called ultra pasteurized milk, but just your normal milk. When milk is open, it should be kept at 4 degrees Celsius and should be cooled down to 4 degrees as quick as possible. You see the influence there. If it's not kept by 4 degrees, it goes up to 20 or 30 degrees Celsius. Your bacteria growth is exponential. Let's look at the cooling technology. What is cooling technology and what is available on the farm and outside there? First of all, we have to realize that there are different bacteria in the system. First of all, those called psychrophilic, they love cold temperatures, anything from -2 to -5 degrees Celsius. Then you get psychrotropic, 0 to 20 degrees Celsius, mesophilic, 10 to 30, thermotropic, 25 to 45 degrees, and thermophilic, 30 to 50 degrees Celsius. So that's where we have to find a medium or a way to cool the milk down to. And the level that we want to cool it down to, the best level is 4 degrees Celsius. Then we are safe in accordance to the regulations to ensure that the bacteria growth will not be as bad as it is too hot, let's say around about 12 or 13 degrees Celsius. But again, if it's too cold, you have the psychotropic bacteria growth. So important to have the medium. So 4 degrees Celsius can be seen as the optimum cooling temperature for milk, and to keep it there in the cold chain. The rule of thumb is then to cool the milk down to 4 degrees Celsius within 2 to 2.5 hours after milking. That is very important that we do that as quick as possible, and that's where technology comes in to ensure that we can do that. There are different cooling methods. I'll just go through the few basics. First of all, water from a main supply or well, cooling rings, surface coolers, ice cones, water tanks, and then modern cooling technologies. On farm, we make use of cooling tanks or silos, depends on the scale of economy, and then of course pre-coolers or deep coolers and condensing units, which are used to cool down. Cooling tanks are specified by codes, and not to bore you with a lot, but when you hear about a cooling tank, let's say class 2B2, it means it is manufactured or specified for 2 milkings a day in the morning and the afternoon. It will be able to cool down with an ambient temperature of 32 degrees Celsius, and it will take less than 3 hours to cool down for that specific cooling tank. And of course, the condensing unit needs to be specified and designed according to this, and also if there is a pre or a deep cooler or not. The most common milk tank is designed on direct expansion cooling. So milk is cooled and agitated directly into the tank, and the bottom part, you will have your evaporators. So that will, in plain words, just extract the heat from the milk and cool the milk down. So the refrigerant will react just the same as your normal fridge does. Ice bank cooling, that's an older type of cooling tanks. We have ice water in a ring around the cooling tank, and that will transfer the heat from the milk and cool down the milk. Clip-on plate coolers, that will cool the milk before it reaches the bulk tank. And dairy processors use that a lot as well during the processing of milk in different stages. It can be used for pre-cooling or instant cooling. Pre-cooling, I'm referring to using well water or normal tap water, which is around about 18 degrees Celsius. Where instant cooling, we use ice water. This is around about 1 to 2 degrees Celsius. Now, the plate cooler in principle, just in basic principle, it uses corrugated steel, stainless steel plates in different configurations, and milk flows inside between these plates, and on either side you will have the refrigerant taking up the heat from the milk and cool it down. As a rule of thumb, you will cool down the milk 2 to 4 degrees Celsius above the water temperature of the coolant. Remember I said the pre-cooler, we use well water or tap water, which is 18 degrees Celsius. So you will be able, should be able to cool down your milk from 37 degrees coming from the cow's udder to about 22 degrees, which means the milk that enters the cooling tank will be around about 22 degrees, and you will just have to cool it down from 22 to 4 degrees as quick as possible, but not more than 2.5 hours. So that will give you the benefit of not adding too many compressors to do the hard work for you. So the pre-coolers are assisting you to do that work. Where your ice bank, this is just an indication that your warm milk will go through and your cold water will go on either side and cool down the milk. Instant cooling, where you use ice water of 1 to 2 degrees, remember 4 degrees above the cooling medium, you should be able to get the milk into the cooling tank around about 5-6 degrees Celsius, which means you don't need a lot of capacity on your condensing unit to bring it down to that acquired 4 degrees Celsius within the 2.5 hours. So this is one of the most effective ways of cooling down milk as quick as possible. Remember, that's the key word. We want to bring it down to 4 degrees as quick as possible to inhibit the bacterial growth. The longer we wait, the more bacteria we have, and we cannot cool it better. Once the milk is in the tank with that amount of bacteria, it's there. You cannot pasteurize or cool the quality better. So ice bank tank, but then again, it all depends on the economy of scale, because it costs money to generate the ice water. So it's just a calculation of how much milk you want to put through. It's around about 2.5 times the volume of water that you need for one liter of milk. So 2.5 liters of coolant will be used for 1 liter of milk. So easy calculation to do. What is the economics about it? So what is the influence of cooling method choices? First of all, the daily milk volume. How much milk do I get from my cows? Well, that can be anything from 12-liter cow, which I typically get from the pasture-based farms in KwaZulu-Natal and the Western Cape, up to 40-60 liters a day per cow. It depends on what your feeding strategy is and what the economy is about that. Because remember, I said that your feeding cost is about 70-75% of production cost. So these days, we tend that many small-scale farmers, smaller farmers, tend to sell out to bigger farmers which are getting mega farms. You're talking about 4, 5, 6, 10,000 cows in milk on one farm. It also been influenced by the number of milkings for storage. Many farmers, or in the past, many farmers only milk twice a day. But by milking 3 times a day, you actually lessen the pressure on the cow's udder and less health problems. So people are moving to 3 times a day, or even the very high producing cows 4 times a day. But that also contributes to more other factors to take in consideration, like your number of laborers needed to be milked and all other social problems that might go with it, and feeding practices that needs to be adjusted accordingly. Then, of course, you needed cooling capacity. You need to ensure that you have enough cooling tanks to ensure that you can cool properly. Ambient temperature is important to take into consideration as well. Just a few examples of the cooling tanks, direct expansion tanks, anything from 14,000 to 32,000. And of course, the silos can also be larger, the vertical silos. Open tanks, which is used for smaller enterprises, but of course, it's not a CIP system and manually cleaned, where it can also maybe pose some problems. The older types of tanks are there, but not used very commonly these days. And as I've mentioned, the condensing units are calculated according to your cooling capacity that you need if you don't or do use pre-coolers or deep coolers. Automatic cleaning units, there are many automatic cleaning units available, and that will ensure the correct automatic dosage of acid and alkaline detergent. And the whole process of cleaning is pre-programmed to ensure that the water temperature and your rinsing temperature, everything will stay within the set limits. Again, I want to re-emphasize, one cannot cool or pasteurize quality into milk initially. It will be, the best that it will be is the way that it ends up into the cooling tank the first time. I was asked just to touch on the basic calibration of thermometers, just basic for those of you who are going onto the farm to use your thermometers and ensure that they are correct, because you don't want to give the wrong advice to the farmers. Now, there are 2 ways to do that. Either you use the boiling point method or the freezing point method and just adjust your thermometer accordingly. Ice point method is you fill a large container with crushed ice and water, and you submerge the thermometer stem into the ice for about 30 seconds. Then you hold the calibration nut and rotate the top part to go down to 0 degrees Celsius. And then you know it's calibrated according to the ice point method. If you want to make sure you use the other method, you can use the boiling point method, where you bring clean tap water to boiling and keep it at the boiling point. Again, submerge the sensing area of the stem or the probe into the water for about 30 seconds, and again adjust it accordingly to the on the top on the dial to 100 degrees Celsius, which is the boiling point. But remember, the boiling point of water can vary depend on your elevation or height above sea level. Just to conclude, and I want to emphasize that it's important if you go on a farm or wherever you go to do problem solving, to do it as a team approach. That can consist out of the milk buyer or the processor, the feed consultant, the veterinarian, the milk hygiene specialist, the milk equipment representative, and the herd manager, which might be the owner. And we found that if you do that on a monthly basis, to do a quick check-in with everybody and see what the problems are and address them accordingly, and to set up an action list and also do training, that helps a lot to ensure that you resolve those problems on farm and also set up a SOP accordingly. Thank you very much.
Wow, Rykie, that was really, really great. And I think for all of us listening, we got a lot more than just temperature. I love what you said about we can't cool quality into milk. And at the end of the day, if we're not looking at those basic things, we're going to land up with problems in the milk that we can't take care of when we get to the cooling step. So thank you very, very much for that. We've now got a great opportunity for questions. So I'm going to ask all of you to think about some questions that you may have. I think there's some really technical ask you to give us some information or rather some questions from your side. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to pop those in to the question bar. Remember where we said I can see them straight away and then I'll be able to share them with Rykie. In the meantime, just a couple of points from my side. As I said, Rykie, I really think that statement, you can't cool quality into milk, very, very important. And I think, do you find that there's a trend? You know, you emphasize the sort of basics a lot. Do you find that farmers, you know, think that the cooling step is almost like a catch-all?
Yes, definitely, Linda. I think what is important is that maybe it might be that, and that's where the milk processor or the milk buyer and also maybe any consultant that comes onto the farm is to start at the cooling tank and ensure that if the quality is good of the milk, of course the cooling is the most important part to look at. But that doesn't stop there. That's why I say you have to look at all the factors around the farm, where the cow sleeps, what happens to the cow when she walks to the milking parlor. There's a lot of factors influencing that. But yes, definitely, some farmers tend to expand, but they don't look at the capacity of cooling to expand accordingly and to ensure that you still cool down the milk within 2.5 hours.
Okay, I think that was, that 2 hour sort of window is also, really important. I think it's something that when we're on farm, it's an easy check. So I think that was really great advice. The other thing I just wanted to comment on was how many times you mentioned the word profit. And I think it's great because ultimately the farmer wants to make money. And so I think from your point about continually looking at the profitability of the processes and what could be taken away from the profitability is just such a good selling point. Going back to those farmers and saying to them, you need to increase your capacity. I'm sure the first thing they're going to say to you is cost, but it's going to cost me too much. But I think you gave us so many different angles on the potential to improve your profitability if you actually manage these basics correctly. Is this just sales talk or is this really your experience?
No, I think it's, to spend too much money on technology or equipment is very easy to do. But again, one needs to know, and I did speak, and I know it might not be really very important to everybody, but if you go too much into technology, there are so much information and reports that you need to evaluate on a daily basis, and basically the farmer or the manager don't have the time to do so. So the basic information is still how much milk and what is the quality of milk. That is the main thing. To know what is the conductivity of the milk when it enters the cooling tank, or what is the washing solution that you've used on each day. You don't want to see it. As you said correctly, you have to measure it, of course, to see if it's still in line. But to take all of that nice things into consideration, what is the blood content of the milk? What is the enzyme level of content of the milk? You need to evaluate that information, and the farmers or the managers don't have the time to do that. So the basic thing is, yes, the milk quality, the somatic cell counts, the bacteria count, and milk temperature. I think those are the most important factors to take in consideration.
Absolutely. Okay, so now some specific questions. First of all, some thanks from the delegates for a great presentation. So thank you very much, Rykie. If we, and yes, Mandla, you're asking with regards to the presentation. Rykie has very kindly agreed to make his presentation available to you, so that will definitely be available on the Food Focus website when we publish this, the recording of this webinar. So a couple of specific points, Rykie, that perhaps you could help us with. Is there any way that we can check with the quality of the milk whether or not there have been temperature issues? I mean, I think, you mentioned the importance of somatic cell counts. If the milk is not cooled properly, will this be reflected in the micro or quality attributes of milk when it's received, at the milk receiving point at a dairy?
I think what is important, that's why I say it starts on the farm level. So if we cool the milk down to 4 degrees within 2 hours, and the milk processor collects the milk, of course, that also has got an influence of what is the temperature of the milk when the bulk tanker receives the milk, and the temperature when it arrives at the plant. Of course, and I know that there are procedures and SOPs in place whenever the milk is transported. They measure the milk and the quality as soon as it arrives as well at the dairy plant or the processing plant. And that's where the main thing is important, to keep the cooling chain as tight as possible, and not to extend it too long. Otherwise, the bacteria growth is just going exponentially. And again, for the processes, it's very, very difficult to get the quality where it was. Let's say the quality was good or excellent at the farm, and maybe for some reason the tanker takes a long time to get to the processing plant, and the bacteria growth is higher. And of course, that's where some discrepancies also arise between farmers and processors, where they feel that their bacteria count is X and it's Y at the processor. But yes, we have to keep the chain as quick and as short as possible.
Absolutely, and I think this is also an important point when it comes to the selection of the transporter. Is the bulk tanker in fact designed correctly? To be able to maintain the temperature of the milk, bearing in mind that the tanker is not going to cool the milk while it's en route to to the processing plant. So I think the chain concept is really so important. But I think what you're saying to us is, when we look at the micro coming in, for that milk, if the milk was not cooled properly, the micro will definitely tell us a story. And your point about keeping the somatics as low as possible, making sure that you're cleaning properly so that your coliforms are as low as possible. If we're starting with a low count and we're maintaining the cold chain, we should land up with the best possible quality results from a micro perspective when it gets to the processor. Am I correct?
100%. I think you nailed it 100%. Those are the few short. And again, there are so much detail into each of those steps that one can really go on and on. But again, if you know what the basics are and what you need to address, and you start with the basics, and it sounds simple to start with the farm, but that's where your biggest problem lies most of the times. It's easy to point fingers from a farm point of view or from a processor point of view, but it must be a team approach to resolve the problem if there is a problem.
Absolutely. Okay, Boitumelo, I see your questions. Ingrid, won't you please pop your questions into the question bar so that we can answer them? Thanks. I see your hand is up. Okay, so coming to a specific question in relation to the temperature required for raw milk coming into the tankers. So, I mean, when it comes to the legal requirements, or you mentioned 4 degrees, and so where would we find that? If my memory serves me correctly, I actually need to look in the regulation that pertains to milk sheds, because the requirements or the legal requirement to get the milk to the right temperature before it goes into a tanker is actually the farmer's requirement. Am I correct, Rykie?
Yes, that's correct. But so the quality of the milk, or the farmer is paid on the quality of milk. So if the sample is taken on farm and it's not on that temperature, of course there might be rejections from the milk buyer or the processor.
Yes.
Sometimes I reject milk on the somatic cells that is too high, or the bacteria count might be too high. So the farmer will be penalized accordingly. So it's really the onus comes back to the farmer to ensure that the cooling capacity is sorted out and designed accordingly. So that is the basic.
Absolutely. So, Boitumelo, I think the place to look here would be Regulation 961 from
Correct.
the Foodstuffs Act, which refers to the on-farm, that it's the requirement for the milk shed, because the cooling process has to happen on-farm. And I don't think there's any leniency, Rykie, please correct me if I'm wrong, depending on whether your farmer is in, Forfarder, or whether they are, close to you. The requirement by law for that temperature of milk, it must be maintained, whether it's a long distance trip or whether it's just around the corner. Am I correct?
That's correct, and that's why I say it depends on where you are. Where are the milk buyers? We all know that many of the big processing plants have been shut down for various reasons, so they're not very willingly to go to Pofadder and Pitsonderkatrol and go and connect a few liters of milk. Yes. So that's why most of the bigger farms are getting bigger and concentrated as close as possible to the milk processing plants to ensure that you get a very quick collection of milk.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, an interesting question here from Ernst. He wants to know a little bit more about the barium. You mentioned the barium precipitation. Where would the barium be coming from? Would it be coming from the milk, or is it coming from the water?
Mostly from the water. That's why I say it's important. I didn't mention that or discuss it, but water quality is one of the biggest, can be one of the biggest problems. So it's important to test your water every month, and that will be either for E. coli or all the different minerals to ensure that your water quality is in place. E. coli, we all know what it does to quality of milk, and it doesn't take a lot of E. coli to contaminate a whole tank of water. So there's a lot of more minerals to check for, but what the influence of that is to the bacteria count, that can differ from farm to farm, and what the percentage of the problem is. So it's not, there are so many different factors on minerals that can be a problem, but that should be evaluated on a laboratory base. So at least as once a month or once every quarter, to ensure that the quality of the milk is up to standard.
The quality of the water, yes. And so, what if I've got a barium problem, for example? So, Ernst is saying that's all good, but now what am I going to do? If I've got barium in my water, should I be treating the water, or can I use a more frequent acid wash? What's the solution to a potential barium problem?
Well, there are different washing solutions or different cycles that one can use, but the most important is to maybe look how bad the problem is and maybe use another water source. It can happen that you've got water wells close to the milking parlor, and the area where the cows are housed are also close, and you get a lot of bacteria seepage through to the underground water. So yes, it's difficult to pinpoint and say, listen, this is what you need to do, especially to remove that. But all the minerals more or less will be removed by your acid wash. So by introducing more acid washes per week, that will remove most of your minerals that might be a problem. So it's not a death sentence if there is barium in the water. I mean, it is there. Just depends on the level of that. And if it becomes a problem, you can adjust your acid wash cycle and concentration. It might only be needed to do 2 or 3 times a week to increase the acidity of the acid wash, and that can easily be done by the automatic washing machines these days, to program them accordingly, to say on a Wednesday I want the acid wash to be 5% higher in the morning. So that's easy to do.
Okay, excellent, super. Well, there's a whole bunch of other questions that have been coming through. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but everybody that submitted their questions, please don't worry about the fact that we haven't had a chance to raise it. It will definitely be answered by Jacqueline Werdendahl from the Dairy Standard Agency, and I'm sure Rykie will be assisting her with these answers. Please, just a final note, the recording for today's presentation is definitely going to be available on the Food Focus website, as well as a copy of the presentation. I know there was a huge amount of information that Rykie has shared with us today, so thank you so much, Rykie, for sharing your presentation, because it allows us to go through it again. And if we've got any more questions, please to make contact with Jacqueline Werdendahl at the Dairy Standard Agency, because ultimately they want to try and make sure that you're producing milk that is as safe and the best possible quality for the South African market. So Rykie, thank you very much. We really, really do appreciate your time, your effort in putting together the presentation. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much. And yes, please, all questions, I will definitely answer them to the best of my ability. Please send it through. I will address them.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rykie. We really will take you up on that offer. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. Sincerely hope that you agree with me that this Wednesday webinar was a really, really great investment. Thank you again to the Dairy Standard Agency for helping us to get better and better at milk processing. Thank you, Jacqueline, and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Great to chat to you.
Thank you.